Great. So I remember when I was a kid, and we all have that moment when we knew what the assignment was and we didn't quite do it. And we're sitting in class and the teacher says, all right, turn in your papers. And you have that moment when you're like, oh no, I don't have it. What am I going to do? And even though I was in the back of the room, I felt that moment from you when you thought you were sitting in a session for big data. And thankfully you're not. So that's the first good news I have for you, because we're going to talk about something much more interesting than that. So good choice. And afterwards, if you need me to tweet that you went to the big data session so you can tell your boss that you did, I'll make that happen for you. So we'll keep our secret together, okay? So I've got a couple of things to talk about, but the first thing I thought I'd talk about is how scared I am. And it was an interesting place for me to start being a writer, because when I started writing Lyconomics, it was from a place of fear. And it was specifically about three things that I was really afraid of, and I want to tell you about those three things. And the first one starts with a story of a gentleman named Christopher Latham Scholes, who had an idea, and his idea was to build a typewriter, to let anyone write anything on a typewriter. And he created this typewriter, and he created the keys and let them type on paper, and over time he realized that the typewriter had a problem. And the problem with the typewriter was, as soon as you got a little bit too good at typing, and you typed too fast, when these keys were hitting the paper, they would go too fast and they would get stuck. So people were typing too fast, and he had to slow them down. He didn't know how to make a typewriter faster, so he couldn't solve it with technology of the time, so he solved it with design. And the way he solved it with design is he invented a keyboard that would make it so difficult for people to type, because the most commonly used letters would be spread apart, so he would slow them down by default. That keyboard is this keyboard, the keyboard we all use today, the ASDF QWERTY keyboard. It was invented to slow us down. It was invented to be suboptimal, so that we couldn't type so fast. Now, of course, computers came along, all sorts of technology came along. This keys hitting the typewriter never really became a problem anymore. So we were stuck with this keyboard, though. So of course, someone comes along, in this case, a professor named Dvorak, who sees this problem in the 60s and says, well, we can solve this problem now. We don't have the typewriter challenge, so why wouldn't we? So he works and he invents a new keyboard design, the Dvorak keyboard design, that's optimized. You can type most of the words, the 150 most commonly used words in the English language, with just the middle row, super easy. Most commonly letters are very conveniently located. And then he creates a proof point. He goes and he finds a woman named Barbra Blackburn, who's a super fast typist. He trains her on using this system, and she sets the Guinness Book of World Records record for fastest typing at 212 words a minute on the Dvorak keyboard. Clearly, by any evidence, a better keyboard. A better idea, better keyboard. Raise your hand if you use a Dvorak keyboard. Not even one super geek. Another story of a guy we might recognize who had a big idea of his own in 1915, special theory of relativity. Now, a lot of us know the story of Einstein. He was a patent clerk, right? When he created the special theory of relativity, he was a nobody. He wasn't known in the community. And in order to publish this theory of relativity, he went to an obscure physics journal in Germany and published his theory there. That's how he got it out there, right? Hardly what you would consider to be the media empire that something like this might need to be launched at. So Einstein had a challenge, which is he's a nobody. He's publishing a theory that flies in the face of a lot of conventional wisdom of the day. Why would anyone believe him? Why would he have any credibility? And he didn't until this guy came along. This guy's name is Max Planck. He's 20 years older than Einstein, or was. He looks at the idea and says, this is something interesting. This guy's onto something. We need to pay attention to this guy. And he helps arrange a professorship for Einstein in Berlin. And the two men work together for years to develop this theory. Einstein becomes Einstein because of Max Planck. Without Max Planck, he's a nobody. He's a patent clerk that nobody would believe. And maybe the idea doesn't take off. And there's another big idea guy, James Dyson. Now this guy we all know, maybe we have his products in our home. How many people have a Dyson vacuum cleaner? Maybe 30% of the room, okay. He's an inventor, and he had a big idea, and his big idea was to create a product that actually sucked on purpose, right? And the problem with vacuum cleaners of the day was that they didn't because of the bag. And so he created his new design. And his first idea was, well, I've got this amazing new design. Why don't I just license it? I'm a technology inventor. I'm not a vacuum cleaner maker. So I'll just go to the companies that dominate the industry right now, and I'll license it to them. And all of them took one look at his design and said, why would we possibly make a vacuum cleaner without bags when we make all of our money on the bags? Right? It's like printers with the ink. They make all their money on the recurring purchases of the bags. So nobody bought it. So Dyson said, well, I'm going to make it myself. And he creates his first Dyson vacuum cleaner, and he makes it for the Japanese market. And that's where it starts to take off. That's where it starts to get attraction. Then he takes it to England, then he takes it to the US, then he dominates the entire world. Right. But just that one thing doesn't necessarily take off. People don't buy into it until he gets the momentum of something else. And it leads to a real scary fact, which is we celebrate ideas. Right? How many conferences are dedicated to the power of ideas? How many brainstorms do we go to where it's all about coming up with amazing ideas? Right? We celebrate the geniuses behind ideas. And the scary fact is that a great big idea isn't enough to guarantee success. It takes something else for that idea to take off. You can't just launch a big idea and expect that everybody's going to see it and say, oh my God, you're amazing. We can't believe that we haven't heard of this idea before. Tell me how I can spend my money on that. Right? It doesn't work that way. We need something else.